And you're good to go live now, Vinu.
Friends, all those of you who've tuned in from different parts of the world, we gather here in a month that is extremely important for all of us. All of us who work for children around the world, November provides us an opportunity to pause because not only is it International Children's Day, which we observe around the world, it is also the celebration of an anniversary which over 3 decades ago was made at an event where the rights of the children were recognized. The Convention on the Rights of the Child came live 30 years ago in this month and this date, November 20th. So I'm delighted that we have this high-level panel in this month that is dedicated to the needs and the rights of children. But I'm also delighted that this high-level panel will give us a chance to look at a very important challenge that the world is facing today. In the midst of a pandemic which has affected over 200 countries, in the midst of a pandemic that has not only affected 200 countries and millions of people, we also know that about 1.5 billion children have been affected one way or the other. The data dashboard is very dynamic. We have seen, even as of October of 2021, 800 million children have been in some ways disrupted and disconnected from their educational settings. In the midst of this, I think we are meeting because there are important questions to be asked. And this global symposium, which is held online, therefore making this conversation more widely accessible, we are going to look at the desire and the challenge of how to learn to live together. As I said, 200 countries in every continent and every country has been affected. But we also know it is for the first time in recent history that the scientific community have given us a disruptor to the pandemic in the form of vaccine. While that has been done at an unprecedented way and in such record time, the distribution is very unequal. In the last 4, 5, 6 months, we have not only looked at this visible agenda of vaccine inequity, ranging from less than 5% coverage in some countries in the south to 80% coverage in some parts of the north. We're also looking at a multi-dimensional burden that our children are facing. The learning crisis, the nutrition crisis. Hunger is again a word that is running in our conversations. Poverty, child poverty in particular, and the very deep understanding that it is irreversible. Our colleagues in the UN cluster these fundamental rights and call them the survival rights of children. The right to love, the right to food, the right to play. But we also know that children have a right to education. And I think what we will do in the panel today is to look at some of these wider implications of education. When the world is unequally served with the fruits of science in the form of a vaccine, the ethical dilemmas that we face as leaders around the world, but also as advocate of children's rights, I think it's important for us to pause and to see what made us arrive at these situations and intersections where ethical questions have to be asked every day. Learning to live together is not a phrase alone. Learning to live together is an aspiration, because we know that this pandemic has demonstrated that the borders are not as non-porous, as solid, as impermeable as they are. The whole world was brought to a standstill. And we also know that in the midst of the pandemic, we will have to reflect on the relevance of looking at education more holistically. We have seen in some parts of the world, like in India, as children come back to school, they return to school. that it cannot be business as usual. You cannot go back to suddenly studying science and math in children's minds. As I was informed by a child in one of the conversations a week ago, how do we deal with uncertainties? How do we deal with uncertainties? And these are also questions linked to the questions that are being raised by children in classrooms and in homes and across societies. We also know this has been a great moment of looking at the intersection of the values that drive our policies, the values that drive our practical expressions to take care of one another. In the panel today, it is my great honor not only to present the work and to bring to surface the work that we have done at Arigato International for decades now in looking at this shared aspiration of learning to live together. But it is also my honor as a moderator to look both at the big picture with our colleagues from UNESCO, but also to look at actual practices on the ground. We hope in this panel that you've tuned into, you will have a moment to express your opinions frequently and concurrently as we hear from our speakers. Please use the chat box, please use the different means that is provided to you to express your concerns, your opinions, and your feedback. We will go from the big picture to the practice. We will also go from particular efforts taken in some parts of the world. For example, from Kenya, from Indonesia, countries that are looking at it in very specific terms and integrating in their responses both the ethical dimensions of caring for all in the midst of a pandemic, but also the challenging questions of how can education be brought creatively, more responsively, in partnership with children in the midst of the pandemic. I will therefore invite you to be ready to listening, active listening, but also I will invite you to reflecting on how we can integrate these streams of education, including ethics education, which have been kept in the periphery. We will look into national policies and programs, and I hope we will have a rich exchange of ideas that will leave you with some practical thoughts as well, whether it is at the country level or at the community level. We have tried our best to prepare together, and today we will have with us the representatives of children themselves. We have three wonderful advocates for child's rights from the constituency itself. We have Tudor from Romania. Welcome, Tudor. We have Sophia from Indonesia, who's here with us. Welcome, Sophia. We're very happy to have you here with us. We also have Ikran from Kenya, who's here with us. And I think in this segment, in the first segment, we will hear from our children first, and then we will go on. I think to hear the representatives of our partner organizations who will help us present the big picture. So, Tudor, Sophia, and Ikran, we're living in a very globalized world where there's a lot of potential also to learn from one another, not just the shared pain and the shared burden of the pandemic, but also shared resources that we have that we can bring to one another and share with one another. May I place before you these questions and then ask you one by one if you can enrich us with your perspectives and your inputs. May I invite now you to think about these questions. What can education systems and schools do to address these issues and provide more spaces for children to learn with one another across divides? How can schools become active laboratories for collaboration, dialogue, and action? And what personal experiences of active citizenship and social engagement during the pandemic can you share? Shall I invite first Tudor for you to come in?
Okay, no problem. Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Okay. The divides in the societies are reflected also in the children's attitude, being one of the main causes of fight and argues in school. I think the Ministry of Education and the schools can focus more on teaching the children how to get over the divides among them. The schools can create thematic clubs so that the children can become united by a common passion. At the end of the school year, there should be a show where every club can present projects made by children working in teams. This show not only will be funny and interesting, but all year the children will be united in a common purpose, the success of the show. The same unity can be created during the sport contest organized in school, where the team spirit is more important than the ethnic, religious, and cultural background of the members. Schools can organize trips where children can talk, laugh with each other, and get to know each other better. In the trip, they can experience new things and create memories together. This will create a special bond between the kids. The Ministry of Education can also help by introducing courses in the school curriculum, where children can debate the main issues in their communities, challenging their own prejudices, can learn how to accept a different opinion and how to solve peacefully their conflicts. The students also need safe space in school to share things about their cultures and religions and listen with respect about others' traditions and beliefs in order to be able to understand and appreciate them. We don't have to forget that the children are not the only ones who have these problems. They learn from the adults around them. So the parents and the teachers have to learn as well to have a non-discriminative attitude and to appreciate the differences around us. I think there should be workshops for them on how to be a role model for us. I also think that if the adults want more unity in the societies, they should focus more on bringing unity in the schools. Once the schools will promote a culture of peace, the positive changes will be possible in the world too. We, children, really want this change, but at the moment we need your guidance. That's why I would love to see some of our ideas implemented in schools around the world.
Thank you so much, Tudor. I think those that invitation to be heard and that invitation to co-create solutions is heard very clearly. We'll keep that in mind, Tudor, as the panel unfolds. May I go over to Ikran now? Ikran, would you share your ideas and your perspectives as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I am answering question number 3, the one that you asked about what personal experiences of active citizenship and social engagement can you share and what challenges did I face? So during the pandemic, children in my community experienced a lot of problems. Some of the problems were hunger due to closure of schools, and many children relied on schools for food because it was a safe space for them. So there was also increase in violence against children due to the fact that they had to stay at home most of the time. They were not going to school during the pandemic. And increase in child marriages. This has been a problem in my community because many parents are living below the poverty line, so they had to rely on food. They had to marry off their girls in order to get food. Young girls have been forced to get married and forget about their education. Their dreams have been buried. So one of the steps that I together with groups from my community have taken place is the implementation of the Children's Solutions Lab. It is a program that started last year by Arigato International under the End Child Poverty and Ethics Education for Children. It was aiming to create it has aimed in creating meaningful spaces for children to address poverty through solutions focused on education. So what we did is me together with groups and youth from my community, we lobbied for funds from Arigato International. We took part in a competition. We competed with various children groups from various parts of the world, and our project was chosen. We won some funds to implement our project. So our project was, we used theater and art to demonstrate to the community the importance of educating children. What we did was that, let me just give you a little bit of what we did. We demonstrated to the community. We took one girl, like demonstration now, like acting. We took one girl, we educated her, like now it was acting, we were demonstrating to them. She was educated, she went to school, and she could take care of herself, everything. And then the other girl, she was not educated, she was married off at a very young age. She did not have basic education, even like taking care of her kids. And now we demonstrated to them the effect of lack of the effect that lack of education was bringing to the girl who was not educated, and how education has improved, how it has it has changed the other girl. It has even broken the poverty line, such that we see this girl was able to achieve her dreams as a very young, energetic. She grew up becoming a very young woman who knows what to do in life, who is very who has directions in her life. So the project was implemented by the help of the director of Silver Line in Kenya, a community-based organization in Garissa County. She helped us in creating the play, and we perfectly demonstrated on how education is important to the community. And the children observed that poverty was a major catalyst leading to child marriages. They also observed that parents will opt to marry off their daughters in order to ease the burden of providing for many children. So more girls were married off during the pandemic due to all the frustrations of the system being changed to online learning, let alone the parents getting the money to provide gadgets to facilitate online learning. Many parents cannot even provide food for their children. So the girls had to get married off, and their dreams had to be destroyed. So we used art because we saw that art breaks the barriers of formal communication, and it sticks to the mind of the people. So we faced some challenges during the implementation of the project. Some of the challenges was that our funds were not enough. We were only using $500 to implement a project it was not in like the budget we made. The money was not. It was not enough for us to do many things. So we had to invite only 25 people, and we had to also, COVID-19 was also a challenge because we had to follow strict government protocol, public health protocols. And we were not able to facilitate skilled personnel to help us in implementing the project. So we also, we sent the reports to Arigato International, and that is what we did as children in my community to demonstrate to them how education is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikran. I wouldn't attempt to summarize it, but I think very important things that you bring to this, to the start of this panel. Challenges that children face from hunger to child marriage. But what you've also shared with us, Ikran, is that children also have the capacity to come together in the midst of these uncertain terms to co-create solutions. And the Children's Solution Lab, I think as we go forward, I hope we will have an opportunity to know more about what you're doing there. But Tudor and Ikran, I think we thank you also for setting the tone for this panel. And I come to you, Sophia. What would be, you represent another continent, you represent Indonesia and Asia. What are your thoughts, Sophia, today? We are eager to hear you.
Okay, I'm answering question number 2 on how can schools become active laboratories for collaboration, dialogue, and action to empower children and youth to build more inclusive societies. I would like to start about how schools can become active laboratories for collaboration, dialogue, and action to empower inclusive children and youth through storytelling. I live in Poso, Central Sulawesi, Indonesia, an area that has experienced conflict involving religious communities. I was not born when the conflict occurred, but until now, I still feel how important it is to build an inclusive community life so that differences do not cause conflict. I am like many other children in the world, and we all never choose where we were born, what ethnicity, and even religion since childhood. No one chooses to be born in America or be Jewish or be original or be in Europe or be Jewish or in the Middle East and be Muslim or in Indonesia, brown skin and Buddhist or Christian and so on. Every child and we are born first of all as human beings, not in the wrapper of religion. In fact, cultural and religious traditions have an important value in the development of every child in the world, including myself. Therefore, diversity is something that is undoubtedly. I am part of a class that is predominantly Christian, but I often hear the call to prayer from the only mosque in my city. I have also seen my Hindu friends make traditional rituals, which I think are very unique. I saw some children wearing head coverings or head scarf. I have also met friends with children in several countries who have told me that their traditions are very unique. Our world is very rich and very rich and diverse in ethnicity as well as religion. Therefore, school, as a place where children grow and develop together with others, is very important to take a role in making children learn about this diversity and appreciate differences. I may not be able to recognize diversity around the world, but I and many children around the world can start from the environment where we live, which is school. How? First, by creating a curriculum so that children can learn, recognize values, and interact with various religions, ethnicities, races, cultures, and others. This curriculum allows students to visit various places of worship of various religions, visit traditional or custom houses, and meet religious and traditional leaders. Here, children can listen to universal religious values and get to know each unique characteristic of many traditions. Knowing various religions, ethnicities, races, and different cultures is very important for children so that they can expand their thoughts and knowledge to people who have different religions, races, ethnicities, and cultures from them and without any misunderstanding or feeling inferior or superior to them. This curriculum also allows school children to meet and interact with those of different religions and ethnicities inside or outside school. Interaction between students of different religions will build awareness and solidarity as fellow human beings, regardless of religion. Second, the environment at school and in the classroom develops learning methods that encourage students to respect for people of different religions, cultures, and civilization. Is developed and enhanced by putting oneself in another's shoes. To learn what empathy means. Respect and empathy leads to greater awareness of and action based on individual and collective responsibility, which leads to an openness for reconciliation. Third, the environment at school and in the classroom must create a culture that respects the differences and unique of each student. Children are not only different in religions and ethnicities, but also have different talents and interests. Appropriately, school provides space and knowledge according to the talents and interests of each child. Schools must also support and allow students to be able to choose and develop the lessons they want to know. Thus, schools everywhere in the world can become inclusive and comfortable places for students to learn. And that's all for me.
Sophia, that's a lot, and it's many wise words. I like the way you proclaim to us the world is very, very rich. Indeed, the world is very, very rich. The challenge is how to bring the richness of our world into our classrooms and take the experience of the classrooms out into to the wide world. Well, Sophia, I also think you mentioned something very important, and that is diversity and exploring diversity from closer home to understanding diversity in the wider world. And so you also speak about how to approach it. I hope Tudor, Ikran, and Sophia, you will also listen to your colleagues, senior colleagues who are here, and we can have a conversation going forward. Ms. Gianni, we're so happy that you're here with us from UNESCO. I had the privilege of reading through in preparation the wonderful report that UNESCO has brought forth on the future of education. I think when Sophia was speaking about the richness of the world, she was pointing to us sometime, I think, also about how the classrooms pre-pandemic had not explored full potential of education and the learning space. Of course, the pandemic has also shown us that classrooms can be disrupted, and suddenly the family space and the community space become the only learning spaces. So, Ms. Gianni, I've been also speaking about how triangulation of learning spaces can happen more mindfully as we go forward and not just reduce it to classrooms. With the current education crisis in the midst of the pandemic, and the statistics is all there. UNESCO provides us the statistics, national governments provide us, the statistic that I mentioned, 800 million learners, and the divides of every type, the digital divide, the divide between formal education and the real needs of children. In the midst of this, I would like to ask you what should be the role of education today to address some of these challenges, because it is not business as usual. And I think the post-pandemic world, if we are to build back on this experience, cannot be the same world we will allow our children to come in. So as someone who represents UNESCO and is at the helm of affairs as Assistant Director General for Education, we are eager to hear from you your view, but also as to how children can be active participants in the journey of transformative education as we go forward. Over to you, Ms. Gianni.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for raising up these two important questions. And thank you, Arigato International for having me and bringing all us together in this interesting dialogue. It reminds me a little bit to an inspiring meeting I had the privilege to attend last month in Rome, an interreligious religious dialogue at the Vatican, during which Pope Francis actually himself called for educational renewal to advance universal fraternity. And that this is a bit the starting point, I think, of all we are discussing today. And as you mentioned, we just heard from young people directly, very clearly, Tudor, Sophia, Ikran, about their challenges they're facing, about the impact of COVID-19, and how we can now address a new model of education, which are the opportunities as well as the tools we have in our hands. I don't want to go back to numbers that you already mentioned in the opening of this meeting. We know that the impact on education of COVID-19 has been huge, unprecedented, and that's why UNESCO, since the starting of the pandemic, actually was. I think there is a problem in my. Peter, you are in the screen, and it's okay. And I think that it's really very much about the reaction that UNESCO organized around these 1.6 billion children and youth being out of school because of the virus. We established a global education coalition counting today around 200 partners. We organized, a common agenda and calling the international community actually to share with us a collective responsibility to provide solutions and tools. Having said that, so now what can be done in this recovery phase and looking beyond the pandemic? How should education be transformed, as you asking me, to provide children and young people with the opportunities and spaces, right, to become more active participants? Well, let me mention first one interesting initiative that I'm sure will inspire our debate as well as our action plan in the coming months. You already recall the release of the Futures of Education report, which has been actually presented at the General Conference last week and here in Paris. And this is very much about proposing from the International Commission appointed by the Director General Azoulay 2 years ago, the need for a new social contract for education, can repair injustice while transforming the future. We know it's an ambition agenda. We know it's very much about rethinking, many components of the educational journey and system. It's about first grounding the social contract in human rights and basing it in principles of non-discrimination, of social justice, respect for light, and cultural diversity. It's also about, how can I say, promoting an ethical care. If you ask me which is the main message I take from this report, that I kindly ask all of you to have a look, you find on the website of UNESCO, I think the critical phrase is learning to care. And this is what we need in this century. And of course, we already have something at UNESCO within the SDG 4 to give a concrete solution. Is what we call Global Citizenship for Education, which is a specific program building on our work on peace and human rights education, and very much grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 1974 recommendation, a kind of milestone in the global debate on education, the first time that member states agreed about mentioning education for international understanding, for cooperation and peace. And now the job is to, how can I say, to include this program concretely within curriculum and making a cross-cutting topic within education systems. Then the second question, quickly about how can we recommend policymakers to prioritize education, which are the ways, and I see actually 3-4 points to highlight concretely. First, it's about for policymakers ensuring quality education is based on human rights and supports knowledge, skills, as well as values and behaviors. I mean, changing behaviors, attitudes that can really change behaviors, and this is what we are doing, addressing, for instance, hate speech from the educational side is what we are doing, using education and global citizen education as a concrete tool to address fake news and all these amplified system of disinformation and discrimination that actually the COVID-19 amplified very much. Second point, it's about providing learners with what we call an holistic educational experience. That means not only being focused on developing learners' cognitive skills, that of course are very much important. I mean, you must know what you are talking about, you must know maths, you must be science, you must be languages, but also providing them with what we call the socio-emotional and behavioral learning to be really equally important as key components of quality education. And this is very much what this crisis actually, brought up, right? The more we were obliged to use online platforms to assure continuity of learning, and the more we realized the importance of socio-emotional learning. Third and last point is about using education as a tool for, how can I say, co-designing change with young people, not only listening to them, not only doing something for them, for empowering them. Of course, it's important, it's one of our objectives, but it's very much having young people co-creating the process. And this is what we are doing, just to give you a complete example, or we are trying to do better and more in the coming months about climate change education. No, I mean, there is a movement, there is a lot of criticism. We were in Glasgow with a common agenda with ministers of environment, and they commit to include the climate education in their curricula. Having said that, we want to have young people prioritizing their own agenda, education as a topic, and we want to see how they can contribute with their vision, their ideas, even with their criticism. Why not? But I do believe that this is a process in the making, and you can sure that UNESCO will be on the front line on all these perspectives I try to briefly summarize, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gianni. I think what you bring to us as a summary, I think, is also the pointers to ethics of care. And you couldn't have raised a more important issue like the ethics of care in the midst of the pandemic. Also, I think, Ms. Gianni, you speak about this holistic educational space. And we all know that it is an aspiration, but the pandemic has also shown us that it is a necessity. I think what Sophia is speaking about wanting to understand diversity, or what a little while ago Tudor was telling us, please include us in the table. These are fundamental challenges to the educational system. And I see in your backdrop, the line from UNESCO which says, "Learning never stops." I think at Arigato International, particularly our ethics education program, we say learning must also include learning to live together. And in the midst of the pandemic, I think we have seen if we don't learn to live together, nobody is safe. Nobody is safe, and nobody can prosper and progress. And so I thank you, and I think we look forward to, with UNESCO, I think organizations like Arigato International today are well equipped to explore this new process. But we are also, I think, informed by our experience of over 20 years of working with children and finding the bridges between what faith and values offers and how that can connect to the big world. As we listen in further in this panel, I think we have a very important moment now to speak about what Ms. Gianni spoke in the beginning, and that is the ethical dimension, the human dimension. Judge Mohammed, we are very delighted that you are here with us. You have been a very important dialogue partner for us at Arigato International. The Human Fraternity document that was signed by Pope Francis and His Eminence, the Grand Imam of Al Azhar, I think draws attention in the midst of a pandemic to this notion of human fraternity. And I had the privilege of reading this 90-page document. And there are two things that stayed in my mind very deeply when Pope Francis says every generation must renew what it holds close for itself. And this renewal requires action, but also requires thinking together. And it also points towards its impact, the impact of the pandemic and human suffering, particularly on the marginalized, including women and children. I ask you to help us understand better, Judge Mohammed, what role religious communities play in promoting an education that we now want to make more holistic, on fostering solidarity, where human fraternity is not an after-school program, but human fraternity and human social cohesion become connecting threads in the midst of discovering language and math and logic and science. Judge Mohammed, please help us to understand and answer this question.
شكرا جزيلا. I think we have interpretation. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think we have an interpretation. Thank you so much. I am so happy with this dialogue. I'd like to thank you and Sophia and Ikram. We are here for you. All of those leaders are being free for you. I think your dialogues, your speech is really important, and it will be done with actions, with planning to guarantee bright future for you. Ikram, you have raised so many issues suffered by the world nowadays. All what you have mentioned with Sophia will be taken into consideration. We here in our committee, we will take those into consideration. We will have a special meeting for all what you have said, what you have mentioned, because this is a very important interaction to because all of the good people who love peace will stand for those words, will be enthusiastic to take actions, those issues faced faced for you, faced for all of us. And also I'd like to thank Mr. the moderator, and of course I'd like to thank Arigato for this important work, for this accurate work, these accurate actions that they are harnessing their time, and of course we all the time communicating with them, and they all the time enhancing and promoting education all over the world. They put it into consideration, and the question asked by my dear moderator is something that's really important. I think that a dear friend has referred to this issue, which is enhancing the important dialogue, the latest important dialogue attended by Francis and Al-Azhar leader, in order to discuss the education, how important it is. I'd like to quote from you that, as you said, education is important, is everything. It's really important, and the poverty is the problem, the main problem. So education is the main factor. If we if we have like lackage, shortage of education, we will the poverty will be caused, and also other problems like children marriage, increasing diseases. All of those problems in our lives is because poverty. So we have to get in shoulder, to be responsible, to have the solidarity, to support the poor communities which do not have factors to educate people. So the role by religious leaders, by religious communities is very important. We need to encourage them and to call them to practice the rules. So, for example, we have a document that we have in our modern age. I call all of the participants today. I call all the participants to highlight the document released by Al Azhar leader, the Imam, and also by friends to call the whole world, to tell the whole world that religious communities is really important. We need to sign general principles. One of the important principles in this document, allow me to read it for you. He says that children right, the basic children rights in raising up them in the family, it should be a main duty by the family, should be provided. No children should be forbidden from those rights, and anyone will forbid the rights will be punished. And also, we need to take care of the risk that the children will be forbidden, and we need to high care with the children, and to give them all of their basic rights. I call all of you to care for the children and to take care of them in order to avoid any harmful practices by the digital social media. So they should have benefits of social media, of this digital environment that might be affected on their mindsets. In order to, we need to avoid it because they might have encountered with harmful practices because of this digital environment. So the religious curriculum should be uh, uh, taught in all of the schools, the tolerant religious curriculums. We have millions of students. They are studying in Al Azhar schools, and our big Imam has taken these principles and this document and applied it in our schools. So we are working with UNESCO, with Ms. Stefania, and she is supporting us so much. So we are working with UNESCO to have a global curriculum of human solidarity, human brotherhood. So we are working with them in order to cooperate with producing knowledge curriculum to enhance the solidarity, especially in poor communities and other communities to who are facing COVID-19 poverty, and we need to prove to them that we are all here in solidarity in this cooperation to face these problems and these diseases, whatever the diseases they are. How for the religious communities to work more in order to face the discrimination. So we have uh,
في المشاركين في هذه القمة العالمية للشباب
as participants in this symposium under the auspiciation of the Grand Imam and the European Union. We will exert every effort to include you children and young people. As I talked to you, Maria, before, we should also work to phrase technological programs for children in order to inherit the fraternity principles. I'd like to say in this regard that the children's rights is our responsibility as all. I don't want to repeat what has been said before, but we should take very serious steps, not only to me to discuss or share opinions or exchange ideas, but we should think what we're going to do in the next meeting. For all the participants today, they should think what are the actions that they're going to take in order to assess this in the next meeting, in order to inherit these principles in teaching many millions of children around the world. I think this is a shared responsibility for us all. I thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Mohammed. I think you bring to the conversation the second step. The first step was about visualizing education again in the midst of the pandemic and how it can be more responsive. You highlighted two important things for us, Judge Mohammed. You have highlighted the need for inclusive education, that every child has the right to education. You also highlighted to us how in order to achieve that outcome that we want out of education, transformative education, we will have to include values. It's a space where we will have to do much work together. And your inputs have been very, very critical. For all of you who are following this live streaming from around the world, what you saw in Ms. Gianni's presentation from UNESCO was the big picture and the thought, the global conversation around how the frameworks of education itself needs renewal. What you heard from Judge Mohammed was also the importance of not forgetting that education must be every child's right. It isn't a right. And during the pandemic, we have seen far too many children being left behind in a world that is very unequal. It was unequal before the pandemic. It has become extremely unequal. But Judge Mohammed, we have something at the Ethics Education Program, and we want to bring to this Global Week. Over 80 countries are with us today. And that is at a very individual level for children to be able to see this link between understanding oneself and to see how they can contribute to the transforming of the world. I think this is also a bridge that has to come into it. We are very encouraged by the same sort of responsiveness by many countries around the world. And one very important country in this global experiment is Indonesia. We at this global panel are delighted that we have amidst us someone who is leading it in their own country. His Excellency, Dr. Aditomo, we are very happy that you're here with us. We know that your country and its constitution in Indonesia speaks about the Pancasila. And we know that you are a modern laboratory. That laboratory, I think that Sophia was talking about, a laboratory to see how unity and diversity can be lived, but also how dynamically we can see the intersection between all the aspects of education. Mahatma Gandhi said, education is for life, through life, and throughout life, in very beautiful sentences. Your Excellency, we want to hear from you the Indonesian experience with a constitution that promotes values to foster mutual understanding. How is it that you've been able to reflect it in your current educational system? And in the midst of the pandemic, have you been provoked even more to find newer versions or adaptive versions of taking it forward? Over to you, Your Excellency. We are very eager to hear you and the Indonesian experience.
Thank you very much, Vinu, and thank you very much, Arigato International, for having us in this wonderful forum. A very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, allow me to say that I'm very happy to hear and learn from the children at the beginning of this session. Tudor, Ikram, and also Sophia, from Indonesia. Thank you, Sophia, for representing Indonesian children. It's unfortunately ironic that discussions on education too often exclude the voice of students who are actually the main subject of education. So it is refreshing and heartwarming to find that this forum is an exception to that. Here in Indonesia, we also believe that education reform should strive to give primacy to students' needs and voice. As part of this reform, we are currently redesigning our national curriculum and assessment policies. And in doing so, we give priority to some core competencies which are relevant for students' future, rather on giving primacy on content, which mostly adults believe students must memorize and learn. We call these core competencies Profil Pelajar Pancasila, or the Pancasila student profile. As Vinu mentioned just now, Pancasila, or the 5 principles, represents a synthesis of Indonesia's core values. The Pancasila student profile is a formulation of 6 competencies that characterize a lifelong learner, but rooted in the values of Pancasila. These 6 core competencies provide a compass for the redesign of our curriculum and assessment policies. And the Pancasila student profile is very much aligned with Arigato's mission and core values. It is very much about ethics education as it is about the development of cognitive skills. And this is not a coincidence, I think. As a nation with very high cultural and religious diversity, learning to live together is a challenge as well as an imperative for us. In a sense, we have no choice but to learn to live together in Indonesia. Hence, the Pancasila student profile includes competencies such as intercultural competence. This is about appreciation of diversity, celebration of diversity as a positive and enriching feature of our world. This is also about the willingness and ability to communicate and collaborate across cultures, both nationally and internationally. The Pancasila student profile also includes the competency of social collaboration. This is what we call gotong royong in Indonesia. And this is not only about the skills of working in teams, but it's about working together towards social goals, to solve social problems and to contribute to the greater good. And the Pancasila student profile also includes religiosity, which we translate as having personal integrity and having compassion towards others and towards nature as God's creations. And infused in these competencies, I believe you can also notice that they're very much aligned with Arigato's 4 ethical values of responsibility, respect, empathy, and reconciliation. Challenges on how to redesign our national curriculum and assessment policy to be centered on these core competencies and values. And this is not easy. Although everyone seems to agree that the Pancasila competencies and values are important, few are willing to reduce the breadth of the content in the curriculum. Thus, the curriculum is very much packed with content which teachers must deliver and test. Consequently, this leaves little room for dialogue, for discussion, debate, group work, and other pedagogies which are essential in prompting interaction and building trust among different cultural and religious groups. Some have also opposed our attempt to include indicators of tolerance in our national assessment. In our national assessment, for the first time in history, we are measuring teachers' attitudes and support towards the rights of religious and cultural minorities, both in education and in society more broadly. And apparently, this is quite unsettling to some people. But Despite these challenges, our ministry is moving forward with these key reforms. And surprisingly, the pandemic has given education reform a new momentum. The pandemic has exposed fundamental problems in the lack of learning, even with regards to foundational skills such as reading and arithmetics. So everyone is now lamenting on the dangers of the learning loss and discussing what can be done to mitigate learning loss. Well, one important and essential part of the solution is to focus on curriculum and curriculum reform, and thus teaching on core competencies instead of striving for breadth of content. So to conclude, I look forward to learn and hear more from the other speakers in the session. I wish you all happiness and good health. Thank you for your kind attention. Over back to
Your
you.
Excellency, yeah, Your Excellency, we're very encouraged, and I think you bring the realism that leaders like you in elected offices present always to people. I think, like you say, we not only have to speak about learning losses, but we have to I think identify the new momentum that we have to revisit. In fact, if I may borrow a word from our children, hit the refresh button when it comes to education. And like you say, Your Excellency, it is unsettling sometimes to see that people want ethics education at the same level as science and math. And I think we will have to go through this. I always say this is positive discomfort. We have to go through this positive discomfort, keeping in mind, I think, the best interest of children. Because we know when that is divorced, when their needs, their aspirations are divorced from the learning environments, we have asymmetry in power, but we also have challenges in coexisting and living together. At Arigato, it has been our deep desire, both at the Advisory Council, but in the Ethics Education Program itself, to have these dialogues with ministries of education so that we can help one another and make it less unsettling and also more meaningful. So Your Excellency, thank you so much. And I think for all the young people who are hearing you around the world, they will want to be a minister like you, heading and spearheading change for the future of the children. I am grateful that from this picture of a particular experience in Indonesia presented to us, we will also go to another continent, a very important continent, Latin America. We do know this pandemic has affected Latin America in a very significant way. We know, like the continent I belong to, Asia, Latin America has pre-existing problems that we carry forward into the complexity of the pandemic, not just of governance, of resources, of diversity, but also of health challenges, health systems, stretching and poverty being a very important backdrop and player in this. We have the First Lady of Paraguay with us, Ms. Silvana Abdo. Ms. Silvana Abdo, we have heard much about you and your commitment to bringing First Ladies together. Speak of key influencers, and you have your influence straight at the heads of many many governments in South America. We do know Latin America is one of the continents with very high socioeconomic inequities, just like in some parts of Asia. But we also know South America is one continent where the participation of children and young people is very, very high in civil society spaces. How do you think, my dear First Lady, Ms. Abdo, that we can think about value-based education in this new context? Will it be able to support the creation of a new culture of peace and responding to also some of the other challenges our children have been facing, like violence? What do you think, as a First Lady, the role of women can be in promoting policies and programs that foster inclusion and help build more cohesive societies? Over to you, Ms. Abdo. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Muy buenos días a todos y gracias por invitarme al panel a compartir con todos ustedes. Sabemos que la Agenda 2030 en su ODS 4 compromete a los estados a garantizar una educación inclusiva, equitativa y de calidad y promover oportunidades de aprendizaje durante toda la vida para todos. La educación es un derecho humano fundamental y como tal, el Estado debe asegurar que todas las personas tengan acceso a una educación inclusiva y de calidad a lo largo de toda la vida. Sin embargo, es sabido que el proceso educativo trasciende a las aulas y se desarrolla permanentemente en los diversos ámbitos en los que interactúa la persona, permitiéndole satisfacer sus necesidades materiales.
It can, like this, allow to satisfy the personal needs and to develop all their potential. We live in a society, that is pluricultural, and we have people from all different cultures, and the importance is to establish agreements and that they are based in shared values in the future of women. These agreements, this must be a product of an inclusive society in which each participant have the idea of how they can have this aspiration, the values, the skills, and that they have the challenges also considering the each part in identity and the equality as a society is fundamental to establish a relation with the territories in which we develop and as a community that is based of taking care of the environment and nature. And also it's very important the justice, the dialogue, the solidarity between all of us to create an environment of peace in which all the actors, they will be conscious of the importance of all these values. In Paraguay, in that sense, we are taking to actions. They work with women, and we are working also on the values of education, which is essential on the quality and how we are going to take it. The curriculum of the national education, it has to do with the integral formation of the person, elaborating and developing the critical thinking, and also having an education of the environment, and also to have a democratic education and a personal development. In many schools, we have also through games and creative activities, we contribute with values that contribute to the transformation of the person and to create inclusive societies which are the base of the future. We know the importance of this education for the citizens. And in Paraguay, we are really paying a lot of attention to ethics in education, and we do it in a transversal way. And we have a lot of efforts of the learning of the students in mathematics, in languages, in all the different subjects. And also we are very close to the families because the family is the main institution for education. In that sense, the experience, like for example, the women mochileras, that they go to the houses of the people to work directly with them and to share that experience, and that the families, they also tell them what they have done, and we have had great results in this respect. Also, the importance of the inclusion of women and programs that are doing inclusive programs for children. So if we take into consideration that part of the foundation is this education of the children and the school. In Paraguay, 70% of the classes are composed by women. So is fundamental in the process of creation of values. And that's why we believe it's very important to generate these spaces to visualize the variety of women and the different fields of development. The government of Paraguay, through these ministries, We have created actions to promote equality between genders and to empower them, and in particular, eh, in the education. Another important aspect is the responsibility of being parents and how we are going to educate those children, which it falls on the women. Equality, not only for man and woman, for everybody is very important to work for an early age and to teach them on the national education and to focus on this equality, on the rights and the principle of these basics. The pandemic has put us in in a test, and this has helped us to find solutions to save the education. Nobody has the recipe how to overtake these problems. But nevertheless, we have continued working. We have opened doors to society, the empathy, the respect, tolerance. These are values which are fundamental to build the resilience that we all need. We create, this is our phrase, the Pope, to reaffirm the education. Education is always very important. It has to be always present.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abdo. We are very grateful. I think you point to a very important thing of having spaces to begin with. If you remember, Ms. Abdo, what Tudor has said in the beginning, he asked for these spaces. And I think many times when these spaces are not there, it begins from scratch. But I also think you point towards another very important dimension of education, and that is advancing equality and to create more equitable societies. It's easier said than done, but I know this work will require all of us to think together. I completely agree with you. We don't have solutions to many of the challenges we face together as a global community. But as again, Sophia pointed to us at the beginning, one step at a time, beginning from home, I think, in our own continents, in our own communities, we can do it. I'm aware that we are stepping a little bit on the time. So after the next two speakers speak, they have a few minutes each. May I ask the panelists again to recompose their mind, because we will have a rapid fire at the end asking for your recommendations. And I hope all of you who have tuned in from over 80 countries, I understand the live streaming is having many people enthusiastically participating. I hope you're taking notes and thinking aloud and thinking together with us. May I now move on to the next important contributor, I think, to this panel and this global panel. We've gone from Asia to South America, and then we come to another very important continent, and whose experience and whose contribution will shape the future. We have with us Dr. Mulambe, who is the Director of Policy and Partnership representing the Ministry of Education in Kenya. Dr. Mulambe, Kenya has been leading the work on peace education. I personally have been in Nairobi and have interacted with both the religious communities there. And it's fascinating for me to see how a government is advancing the cause of peace education. We know that you're working on a new national curriculum and policies and programs that contribute to a more cohesive society. What challenges remain? You're in the midst of it. What challenges remain and you identify for us as a nation and for us as a global community, Dr. Mulambe? We're eager to hear you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's really a pleasure for us as Kenya to participate in this important global engagement. It was also good to hear from the children, just like our previous speaker said. Many times we leave out the voice of the children, and I think this time round we actually heard the children, and that was quite refreshing, and I appreciate. It was also good to hear that what the children are proposing that we need to do, and also what Stephanie from UNESCO did propose under the big picture and on the need to change the frameworks are what we are trying to do also as Kenya under the competence-based curriculum, which of course focuses on development of competences and of course emphasizing the fact that every learner is actually a winner, and that we need to really get into trying to develop the potential of learners. In this competence-based curriculum, particularly under value-based education, which goes with it, together with the citizenship education that also goes with it, I think we are quite responsive to some of the issues that were raised by the children and also Stephanie. Now, it's true, moderator, that we have been leading Africa in the area of peace education. We have the inter-country quality node, Madam Dora, representing Kenya for Africa, and has been doing a good job in Africa. And of course, we have taken this initiative mainly because of our past experiences. We have had issues of conflict that has really hurt us as a society, and we have seen the need to actually take peace education very seriously. Well, when it comes to value-based education, which of course contributes quite well towards peace, right from our legal frameworks and even our policy frameworks and even our international convention or international documents that we have signed, they have all spoken to the need to enhance value-based education. Starting from our Vision 2030, which is our blueprint, up to the year 2030, we are saying we want to build a cohesive and just society in a clean and secure environment. You can see we are very keen on a just society and cohesive environment. Our constitution speaks to the need to instill national values to all citizens. And of course, our Basic Education Act, which guides us within the basic education, talks about promotion of peace, integrity, cohesion, tolerance, and inclusion as an objective in the provision of basic education. Our policy framework, session of paper number 8 of 2013 on national values and principles of governance, identifies education institutions as critical carriers and drivers of values in society. And of course, our current session of paper number 1 of 2019 on reforming education and training in Kenya provides for the mentoring, molding, and nurturing of values and the integration into the curriculum. The National Youth Policy of 2018 did identify weak value systems, seriously weak value systems, and did bring out really what is really affecting us in terms of making us not be able to achieve. And consequently, we actually now came up with our competence-based curriculum. In the competence-based curriculum, we had to develop a basic education curriculum framework, which now was supposed to be, do I call it the bedrock for the curriculum, to guide both the development and the implementation. And this was anchored in values. You know, it was based on pillars, and this was anchored on values. The competence-based curriculum creates a strong learning environment that enhances academic attainment and develops learners' social skills that last throughout their lives. A positive learning environment is achieved through values modeled by all the schools. The family and school community have an obligation to create an environment where learners feel loved and appreciated. You remember the children talked about love. And of course, in CBC, we have mainstreamed 8 core values, which are supposed to guide us during the implementation of this particular competence-based curriculum. One is love. I don't need to reiterate, but of course, a loving environment is key for the learners. The other one is responsibility. The other one is respect. Respect to one another, respect to property without prejudice. The other one is unity. The other one is peace, which is quite key, even in our dialogue today. The other one is patriotism. The other one is social justice. And the other one is integrity. These values have been mainstreamed into the curriculum. and that in the mainstreaming of these values into the curriculum, we have tried to use what we call a whole school approach. A whole school approach that focuses on the holistic development of the learner. And of course, this refers to both physical, spiritual, social, intellectual, and emotional growth. In this, the teacher is supposed to ensure that values are mainstreamed in the learning experience during all the dimensions, both formal, non-formal, and informal dimensions of learning. The school culture is key to this. And of course, here we are also guiding into development of positive school culture that also encourages practicing of values. The school community members should model values for learners. In implementing values through a whole school approach, we look at it in three ways. One is involve learners, teachers, support staff, board of management, family members, wider school community, and all relevant stakeholders in the development of values. In the mainstream of values, again, we are saying we take care of all the dimensions of learning, formal, informal, and non-formal. And of course, we are also saying that we also ensure that in planning and scheduling of activities, we make sure that the issue of values is made at the center stage. And of course, the issue of inclusivity is quite key in this. In this, we are saying the school should anchor all its practices, policies, and routines on values. Learners adapt the values they experience, not the values that are dictated to them. I think that's also key, that we insist on learners experiencing this, so that not us dictating values to them. The teacher needs to engage the learners in activities that make them think critically about values, so that they become committed to practice them. And this leads to development of moral and ethical behavior among learners. And of course, examples of mainstreaming values, we are saying the values in CBC are mainstreamed as follows. Values in the formal dimension, definitely through the formal learning process. This involves mainstreaming the values in all learning areas. That is key. And of course, our thought was that, curriculum is a very good vehicle in calculating values. And we felt that as we integrate it into the learning areas, then it works. Values in the non-formal dimension, values displayed in the school compound, school gate, talking walls, name the trees, and so on and so forth. Values in the informal dimension, we're talking about role models. And we're insisting on role models, interaction with elders and community leaders, trying to get correct values informally from these particular people. We are saying that in this, we have even developed guidelines that provide direction in the implementation of value-based education in schools using a whole school approach. Now, in my question, you also asked whether we have other policies that also support this. Of course, besides the guidelines for providing direction in the implementation of value-based education, and of course, the basic education framework, the national curriculum policy that guided the curriculum development process, we have other policies also that support this process. We have the peace education policy. We have the Amani Club's guidelines that resulted in peace clubs in schools that again, children among their peers, among their equals, they are able to discuss about issues to do with about peace. Mentorship policy. We have developed a mentorship policy, which again is quite relevant to what we are discussing, where we have really emphasized on life skills within this policy. And in the process, it still adds to what we're talking about. We have also talked about education for sustainable development policy. This equally adds to what we're talking about. Normally, before we get to our elections, because if you look at the whole subject of peace, we came to realize it after the 2007 post-election violence. And we normally have what we call peace torch campaigns prior to elections, where we get to all our 47 counties and ensure that we speak about peace to the young ones. We also have done a national dialogue for teacher training, where we have involved teacher trainers in issues to do with peace building. We have also done training of focal persons and teachers on peace education, focusing on psychosocial interventions, as well as disaster risk reduction among our what we call hotspots. We also have a very important document, Madam Moderator. I know you're getting impatient with me. Child Safety and Security Against Violence, Extremism Guidelines. We have developed a guideline to help guide our teachers and our stakeholders in our schools to identify children who may have been recruited into these extreme cults, extreme activities, so that they can be able to be assisted out. We have sensitized parents associations across the country on peace education. We have also sensitized women leaders, particularly from among various faith groups. So we feel that women will carry this message better to the ground. We also have citizenship education mainstreamed into our curriculum. We have even developed a handbook for teachers and training manuals, which are going to help teachers to take care of this.
I think what you said, the last one, yes. Okay, the last one.
The last one, we have pastoral programs. We are developing a guidance and counseling policy, still focusing on psychosocial support. We have school feeding program. Okay, I think I was just responding to what the first child said, that during COVID, there were issues to do with the school feeding program. And I was just saying that as a ministry, we continued with the school feeding program, where we still gave food packs to the learners, although they were at home, to take care of what that particular learner would say. In terms of challenges,
Dr. Mulambe, if you may give me the indulgence of being the moderator, I think what I will do is, I think you raise very important points. You raise the relationship of what you learn in a classroom with the circumstance. You spoke to us about the 2007 elections and how since then you've been having the peace torches. I think you also highlighted to us very importantly the possibility of students being active partners, but also community being very important, a very important stakeholder, Dr. Mulambe. Everybody who's listening to you across the world in every continent and about 80 countries, I think we'll see in these three examples from Indonesia, from Kenya, and from Latin America, that governments have been doing things proactively. There have been instances where this has been happening, but in the midst of this unprecedented pandemic, we will have to accelerate, augment, and even change a few things that we go forward. To everybody who's listening in, I promise you we will conclude in about 15 minutes. Don't go away, because in the second part, I will be asking all these wonderful leaders from around the world for a quick minute of a rapid fire of their recommendations. Everything is live streamed, but it is also recorded, so you can go back to this very rich and very rare panel that speaks about children in the midst of a pandemic. So may I come, Dr. Mulambe, thank you so much for that presentation. I will come to the final presenter here before I come to the rapid fire of recommendations, and that is Mr. Bodo, who has stepped in the place of Mr. Albert here. Sir, to you, I have a question. That is, the educational crisis has a very important impact on the whole of Africa, with the school closure and the economic fallout. We want to know how can teachers be prepared? We heard, I think, both from the Kenyan experience and the Indonesian experience, that not only children have to be active participants and co-designers, as Ms. Gianni said, but also teachers have to be very important in this building back of a fairer and just society. Dr. Bodo, what would be your thoughts on it? You will be the concluding speaker, and then we will transition into picking your brain on some key recommendations. Mr. Bodo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. First of all, Adea is thanking the organizers really for giving us a chance to give our experience in engaging African countries. But let me also just say that it was refreshing to hear the children themselves in such a forum. They are really a breath of fresh air, and we hope that such forums will engage in future more children, to really, because they're the ones who feel the pinch. Secondly, I want to acknowledge the work that has been done in Kenya by the ICQN, which we support, the Inter-Country Quality Node on Peace Education led by Dora, as has been highlighted by Dr. Mulambe. So ADEA engaged African countries between the month of April and August last year when COVID-19 first hit our continent. And from November of the same year to date, together with the African Union's International Center for Girls and Women's Education in Africa, and with technical support from the African Population and Health Research Center, we are managing a knowledge and innovation exchange observatory, what we call the KICS Observatory on COVID-19. And this observatory is reviewing the evidence around changes in policy, changes in practices in education in 40 African countries that are members of GPE. So we have released so far, since the launch of this observatory, several series reports around areas that training, teacher and well-being, education financing, and schools reopening. And currently we are finalizing a report on learning assessment. So evidence, it is clear that teachers were not adequately prepared to cope during the pandemic. They have also suffered mentally and psychologically during the that has been by the pandemic, resulting on job losses, schools closing, etc. So in terms of policy, we really need a policy shift with regard to teacher preparation. We need to prioritize strengthening teacher capacity during crisis as part of education sector's preparedness and resilience. This is really important. The second thing is to provide teachers with psychosocial support during school reopening, which also calls for prioritizing them in the ongoing vaccination drives in the countries. We also need to review the current curriculum of teacher training and professional development to really include this issue of psychosocial support, because this is how it will now prepare the teachers to really support the learners. Third, the teacher training should also focus on aspects of gender-based violence and look at innovative ways of addressing children's psychosocial and mental health needs, because this will then help prepare the teachers to address the trauma that many students, especially girls, have experienced with the disruption of learning. Fourthly, we need to provide the teachers with adequate resources for training on alternative non-in-person and remedial teaching. This is also critical. And we need to enhance the programs of teachers around motivation. Finally, in terms of teacher preparation and using these lessons of COVID-19, I think we need to rethink and scale up teacher preparation once the COVID-19 situation has normalized or wherever the situation allows. And this includes using distance training solutions based on those lessons from COVID-19. I think those, from a DARE point of view, Madam Moderator, I'm aware of the time. These are some of the things that we want to share with you. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Mr. Bodo, I think those are such important things, the wider implication of education to address issues like gender-based violence, also to assist teacher preparedness. My colleague, Ms. Maria Lucia Uribe, says we have only a couple of minutes. So if I may use the liberty to ask one representative on behalf of the young people and children, and one representative on behalf of the wise elders to give us a minute of recommendation and a closing thought, a minute only. May I invite you, Dr. Aditomo, on behalf of all the wise elders here, what will be an advice to fellow governments to look at education and the needs of children? What will be your recommendation, sir?
Thank you, Fino. With regards to reforming education systems, we in Indonesia are still very much learning as we go. And one important lesson we learned the hard way is that education reform is always political. And in the context of democratic societies, this means it is crucially important to secure public support for key reform agendas. And this means doing a lot of dialogues, a lot of communication to set up the agenda, in particular to raise awareness about an issue and the urgency or the need for reform. In this case, the need to reduce curriculum content to allow deeper pedagogies to stimulate ethical values and critical reasoning. So building this sense of urgency among key stakeholders is also key for successful reform, which we in Indonesia define as reform that is both systemic, impactful, and also sustainable. Thank you, Vinu.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Tutor or Ikran? Ikran, can I ask you to represent the children here and to add your voice to the voice of the elders? Go ahead, Ikran.
Yes, thank you, Vinu. Some of the recommendations I would like to give to the global leaders and to the people who have political seats, who can bring change and impact children's lives. I would like to urge them to support children in all their, if children have things like, let's say they want to do campaigns, let them support children in doing such things. And something I would like to address is about the online studies. I would like to talk about how online studies have affected most of us. They have not been good. We have been having problems. Some of us do not have the gadgets, the necessary gadgets. We do not have technical skills. We don't know how to share our screens. So to the representative from Kenya who was talking about education and the kind of reforms, I would like to urge him to represent us and look into how online studies have affected us and how they should try to change online classes to physical classes so that we can experience learning way better. Thank you.
Ikran, that's powerful. You're calling every elder gathered here, whether political leaders or heads of multilateral institutions, represent us, you say, represent our needs. Yes. We hear it clearly, yes. And we would like to represent your needs, but we want to do it together. Your Excellency, Dr. Aditomo, you've summarized for us that any reform has to begin with persuasion and prioritization, and politicians know it more than any one of us, this art of public persuasion. But I think I want to bring to close this wonderful panel that has brought, because of the situation, the demands of the situation, the need to revisit education itself, to keep content, but to create space for values and ethics to be central in the way education and learning is framed, to keep central not only individual responsiveness to a child that is growing in our midst, but also to systemic changes that can affect 2 billion children in the world. In ethics education, a resource that we put together at Arigato International, we say every child is potentially divine, and a reminder that we have to come together to build a peaceful world. To all the wise elders, the representatives of governments and UN agencies, the country examples, as well as the global efforts, we are grateful. This conversation is incomplete without any of us. To the young people, Tudor, Ikran, and Sophia, you know that elders are eager to work to you. Let us create an intergenerational framework where voices can be heard equally, so that this commitment to building more ethical societies and peaceful societies will have concrete action as well. To all of you around the world, may this be part of your thought and your investment, how to integrate ethics into both education, but also the moral compass in everything that we do for the well-being of our children. Thank you very much, and thank you for the additional 15 minutes that you have provided to us for this thinking together. Thank you very much indeed to each one of you, our panelists, and the representative of the young people. Over to you, Maria Lucia.